right. I have no idea what he said about me, and I'm very curious, and I'm going to find out afterwards. So I'm very happy to be here. My French is non-existent, so I will speak in English. Yeah, this thing called Agile, how many of you are familiar with this term? Everybody, okay. How many of you are somehow kind of living in this world trying to apply Agile? That's almost everybody. About 70% maybe? Okay. So I've been swimming inside this pond for a while. And what strikes me is, wow, this is like spreading. You know, we have Agile everything nowadays, right? We have Agile education and Agile contracting and Agile HR and Agile, I don't know, what's next? Agile origami, Agile diaper changing, Agile pajamas, I don't know. This is spreading, right? And let's talk a little bit about this. What is going on, right? If you take the concept of Agile and say you're new and you want to learn about it, what do you find? Buzzwords, right? Buzzwords everywhere. You get hit by terms like Scrum and Sprint and Velocity and Scrum Master and all these weird terms, TDD. It's confusing. So I'm going to tell you my personal story, how I got into this, and then I'll do something I've never done before, which is try to look into the future. And then I grant you the right to make fun of me in 10 years when it turns out that all my predictions were wrong, but we'll see. So how I stumbled into this. This is me, but I did actually have more hair. And maybe 10, 20 years ago, coding. Done a lot of coding. And what I noticed was, as a consultant in the 90s, writing code in major projects around Sweden, I tried to make really nice code. Right? That's what coders do. They try to make pretty, beautiful code that solves problems. But I was surprised that it seems like, you know, no matter how pretty code I wrote, the projects, you know, ended up like this quite often, mostly, in fact. The bigger the project, the more likely that they ended up like Titanic or something. Nothing got delivered, or something got delivered and it didn't work, or budget overrun, etc. And I was a bit surprised by this. I'm like, is this really the way it's supposed to be? I saw things like a typical project would be, here's a customer who has a problem they want solved, right? That's how any project starts. And then what would happen was we would put together a requirements team to analyze what the customer needs. And then that group would put together a document capturing what the customer needs, and they would hand it off to some design team, and they would analyze how we're going to design this product, and they would output another document, send it to the next team, right, etc. Developers write the code, they create a product, hand it off to a test team, and then the test team tries to fix all the bugs or find them, etc. Right? Does this sound familiar? Right? This is otherwise known as the waterfall model. And of course, the test phase never looks like this. It, of course, looks like that because you find tons of problems and you run into integration hell, right? You've seen this picture before. Now I'm talking about software, but it seems like a lot of other industries are suffering under the same problem. It sounds a little bit like, oh, and by the way, the product that gets delivered at the end is rarely a success because all the way through this process we have misunderstandings going on, right? What did I just do? Oh, I pressed that button. No. Press this button. This button. Okay, don't press that button. Remind me of that. Okay. So, customer is unhappy because the product was delivered and it didn't solve their problem because along this whole process we have misunderstandings accumulating, right? Plus the feedback loop is super long. So it sometimes works, but it usually doesn't. And it reminds me a lot of this cartoon you've probably seen. Anybody recognize this? Right? It's very, very popular. I don't know where it came from. The customer explained this, and then the project leader understood it like that. And then the analyst designed this because they want to make complicated, cool things. And then the programmer wrote like that because they were in a hurry. And then what the customer really needed was this, right? How many of you have been in this project? Hands up. You can be honest, you're among friends. I won't tell anybody. It's okay, right? All right, yes. So a few years later, I was in a startup company, and I was running my own team and hiring people. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I have people now, developers. And wait, now is my chance to influence things. I know exactly how not to build software. So I know how not to do things, but how do I want to work instead? So I started reading up. And I found this thing that today, or later on, came to be known as Agile. It was basically a bunch of patterns and learnings from the industry. Like, well, if we work this way, our odds of succeeding seems to increase. So instead of this, and as most of you are familiar with Agile, this should be no surprise, right? We stop the handoffs, we stop these silos, and instead we put together so-called cross-functional teams. These people sit together, right? If we've got a lot of people, we create several of these teams. And then we don't build a whole product all at once in one take. Instead, we build part of the product, and we deliver something, and we get feedback. And then we deliver a little bit more, and we get feedback. And hopefully, the customer will like the product more and more, right? Initial version, they'll probably hate, but we'll learn a lot, right? We'll learn why they hate it, etc. And then gradually, the product gets better and better, and then, yeah, happy ending, okay? Just out of curiosity, how many of you have been inside a project like this? Wow, that's a lot. That's like 80%. That's really cool. Okay, so this doesn't always succeed, but when it fails, it tends to fail faster, right? And when it fails faster, you fail more cheaply. So I like this world a lot more, right? Okay, that was your Agile intro, by the way. You'll get your certification on the way out, okay? Agile, small, stable, small, cross-functional, self-organized, co-located teams, ideally, right? Okay, so I learned a lot at this. I was working with several companies, and I started getting consulting engagements around this kind of stuff, like, can you come and help us work more effectively? And I learned a lot, and after one particular case, I was interim CTO for a couple of years at a company, and I learned a lot, so I put out an article, and it just became too long, so it became this short book instead. And what surprised me was what happened when this book came out. I suddenly realized, wow, I'm not alone in trying to figure this stuff out. It seemed like the whole world was like, Agile, Agile, Scrum, 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 Agile, Agile, Scrum, Scrum. And they started calling me because they saw my name on a book, and therefore they thought I was some kind of expert. What they didn't know was that this book was my beginner's journey. It's funny how that works. But anyway, as a result, I was given insight into a lot of different companies to see how they worked, their successes and their failures. And apparently this job was called Agile Coach. So okay, I guess I'll have to call myself that. So that's what I've been calling myself for a while at least. But anyway, I ended up by pure accident in a kind of positive feedback loop, which was I learned something interesting. I spread knowledge by putting out books like this. Most of my material is free, articles, videos, etc. And then that gives me jobs. People look at it and they're like, hey, this guy seems to know about Agile. Let's ask for help. So typically I've had kind of more work than I can handle, so I have to prioritize. And then I would prioritize companies where I can make a difference, or companies that are interesting. And because of that, I learned a lot. And then I learned a lot, so I wanted to spread the knowledge, right? And you see this pattern I've been kind of stuck in. Didn't I tell you to warn me about that button, right? I thought you were on my side, right? Okay, I'll do that again. We'll talk about that in the later talk about UX, right? Okay. So around this circle, putting out articles and videos and getting involved in more and more really interesting companies, I started seeing patterns. Great blog, by the way. I started thinking, wait, but why? Why is this working? Why is Agile spreading so fast? Right? And sometimes it doesn't work, and why didn't it work? So I just became really curious. And kind of my mental model became this tree, right, where we have Scrum and Extreme Programming and Kanban. These are 3 different toolkits, 3 different flavors of Agile. When you do these things, you're applying practices such as daily Scrum and limiting work in progress and things like that. Those are like branches. But the trunk is Lean and Agile principles, right? These are branches growing off of a trunk. I started getting interested in what's beneath here, right? The roots. And that brought me to areas such as systems thinking and complex adaptive systems and psychology and curing theory. I became an amateur of many different fields. And I realized this is like super interesting stuff and really powerful. The more I learned about it, the more my worldview kind of changed. And I would come into companies with a different view. Kind of like the Matrix, like you take that red pill and suddenly everything looks a little bit different. How many of you have seen that movie, Matrix, by the way? Right, okay, a few of you. The rest of you, yeah, watch the movie, it's a good movie. Anyway, I started seeing the world differently. And what I saw was this. Waste. A lot of waste. It seemed like, in fact, I would say a fair assumption is that most of what you do and see in your workplace is probably waste. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean that in a positive way. Because if you think about it, if most of what we do is waste, as in creating products that people don't use, creating features people don't need, having meetings that don't add value, creating documents people don't need, it's amazing how much waste we create. And if you can embed that mindset in your company, that, man, we create a lot of waste, that's good. Because then people start looking for it. They're like, yeah, that's right, this meeting, maybe we don't need it. Or maybe we can shorten it a little bit, right? Things like that. Maybe I should ask, why is this feature needed, instead of just delivering it because someone told me, right? So a very useful mindset. And I'm going to give you a little demo that illustrates the kind of waste that I'm talking about. And maybe you'll recognize it. Right? So a little demo. I'm going to need 5 volunteers. And I'm going to need 1 Peter also. So 5 volunteers, step up here. Don't be shy. I'm not going to do anything evil. See? Peter's 7, and even he dares come up, right? So come on, 5 people. Right, give him a hand. Give him a hand. Yes. Okay. So 5 people. I still have 0. Good. And you're going to get up in a line right here, 5 people, right? And Peter is going to come over here. Come, Peter. Peter is going to stand over here. And now you're wondering, what the heck is going on? But don't worry, it'll become crystal clear soon, right? Okay, give them all a hand. Thank you for stepping up. Cool? Yes. And the way this is going to work is, I'm going to get rid of this scary clicky thing before it makes me go dark again. There. Okay. You can get close to each other, right? And this represents a team, a cross-functional team of different people that are going to build a product, or you're going to build features in a product, okay? Each brick represents a feature. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to pass in a brick like that, and then you're going to pass it along through all 10 hands, and you're going to pass it to the customer, and Peter is the customer. And when you give the brick to Peter, he's going to put it on. And this is the actual development environment, right? This is where we release stuff, okay? Cool, it's just a simulation, right? But you get the point. Okay, so go ahead and build this one, pass it through all 10 hands like that, right? Watch them work. It's hard work, and then you just give it to the customer, right? And he puts it on he deploys it, and yeah, give him a hand. Good job. Great, okay. Now we're going to put on our kind of lean geek hats, and we're going to count how many seconds it takes, right? So, are you ready to count? Count. Just one, yeah. 6, 7, and so 8 seconds, right? We've now baselined our process. Cool, Peter, are you happy? What do you have? Are you happy? Good, he's got 2 things. Great, we're cool. We're gonna go again now. This time I'm gonna press the pause button in the middle. And when I say pause, you just freeze, okay? So, go. And pause, freeze, okay. Now, this is a snapshot of what Monsieur David sees. He's the manager at this company, right? He's just walking by, right? And then he runs off to some meeting, right? That's just a snapshot of what he sees. And then they, keep working, right? Keep working, and then pause again. Pause, pause. And the manager comes by, right? And what do you think the manager's thinking? Every time he opens the door, he sees what? What do you say, monsieur? Oh, it's not on. We need... All right, continue talking. Speak in my mic.
Only one person is working.
Seems a bit inefficient, right? Yeah. We've got a lot of people just standing there, right? So we need to fix this, right? We've got one person working. And resource utilization maybe 10% or something like that, right? Oh, it's working now.
Yay.
Cool. So we're going to fix this. I know this consultant. I know this guy who can fix these kind of problems. He's a consultant, and he can make sure we get good bang for the buck. Because these are expensive people. We're paying them salaries. We want to make sure, right, we're getting our money's worth. So we have Dave, the consultant, right? This is Dave. Give him a hand, right? Yes? And we're going to need some sound in a moment. You got sound? Sound, please. I'm really going to need that sound. Oh, there you go. Okay, all right. Cool. Okay. So, this time, Dave is going to keep everybody busy, all right? So let's just reset the exercise. We're going to take these. We're going to reset the exercise. And we're going to make sure we get our money's worth thanks to this excellent consultant named Dave. Okay. Ready, set, go. Right, keep them busy. That's great. Good. We have a resource over here. There's a resource. Oh, get to work, by the way. It has to, no, all through all 10 hands. It has to go through all 10 hands, right? So pass them around, right? Right, pass them around. Good. No, he's not. That's not finished yet. It has to go through all 10 hands, right? Okay. Keep going. And pause. Freeze. Okay, freeze. Right. So let's see here. Monsieur David, the manager, we're going to get him back here because look at that. A snapshot of what he sees, right? So, Monsieur David, check it out.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Everyone is working.
It's great.
Yay!
Right? Cool. Give them a hand. They're super efficient. This is perfect, right? So can I borrow that just quickly? And Peter, are you happy?
No.
No. Look at that. He's got nothing, right? He's got nothing. Okay. So this is just a simulation, but do you recognize this problem? Right? What happens when you focus on keeping people busy? What do you get? You get busy people, and that's about it, right? So I'm going to keep using you. Thank you very much. Just move a little bit to the side so I can show off a slide, right? And then stay here. Cool. So 100% resource utilization. This, by the way, is from queuing theory and math. You take any system and you fill it up, and you get slow flow, right? This is a 100% utilized traffic system. Now, if you think that's a good idea, think again, right? Someone paid for this road. Maybe they're like, yeah, it's great. My road is being utilized. But no, 100% utilization means slow flow and no flow, pretty much. You need some slack in the system, right? A little bit of slack. Now, when you pause the picture, this looks inefficient. It looks like waste. But when you press play and it moves, suddenly you see flow, and you see here like a parking lot, right? Okay. This is a huge problem. A lot of companies optimize for keeping people busy. Right. So what's the solution? Well, there's one of those nice principles, one of the roots of the tree, right? This wonderful trick, which I'm going to illustrate. So let's build the line up again, right? And let's put all the pieces back here, and we'll start over the whole thing. Great. So how do we get flow and just enough resource utilization without getting stuck in a traffic jam? And the way we do that is through the word pull, right? It's a core aspect of both lean and agile. And all we'll do is say, hey, just pull one of these, right? And pass it along. And then pull another one, right? And then pass it along, and then just keep pulling them in a careful tempo, right? And watch what's happening. What do you see? What's going on here? Got pretty good flow, right? We can pause right there. Pause. We have resource utilization of maybe 30%. It doesn't matter what it is. The key point is it's just the right number because they're pulling when they have capacity. Right, so let's keep going. Right? And what if I tell you that the red bricks are worth twice as much? The red bricks are worth more. Right? Watch what happens. Look at that. I just had to say that, and suddenly the same people are doing the same work, but it's worth twice as much. Right? And when we get bottlenecks, the system self-adjusts. So it's beautiful. It's called pull. It's a simple trick. Thank you very much. Let's stop there and give him a big hand, right? Cool. And show it. Visa. Look. Ta-da. Okay. Thank you very much. So, thank you. He wants to stay on stage, I think. Yeah. Så, där kan du sitta. Du kan sitta ner igen. Där kan du sitta. So, that was Swedish, by the way. Okay, so this is just a silly exercise, but do you recognize the problem? Right? It's a very common problem, just kind of everybody being busy. It looks good on the surface, but in practice, very little gets done. And vice versa, when you have flow in the system, you need slack. And slack looks like waste. It looks like, oh, this person has nothing to do. But actually, it's good that this person has nothing to do, because then when the ball comes flying, he or she is ready for it, right? It's a little bit counterintuitive. So the principle of pull is built into pretty much any lean or agile method. That's just one example of waste. Okay, so what I've noticed is this trend going on in companies, which is really fascinating to see. I'll illustrate it using another silly example, right? Here's Bob, okay? Bob is loading rocks. And Bob was awarded Employee of the Month because Bob loads a lot of, no, Bob works many hours. Bob is always there first in the morning, goes home last, right? Wow, yay, Bob. If you have that kind of reward system, if you reward people for working hard, which is sometimes what we learn in school, right? You work hard, you'll do fine, Bob. But yeah, in that case, you have an effort optimized system. You're optimizing for effort, producing sweat. That's what you're optimizing for, right? How many liters of sweat per month would be your KPI, right? Okay, then we have Jim. Let's say we have another person named Jim, and Jim doesn't work very many hours, but he loads a lot more rock. He gets more rock loaded. How? Well, because he spends time learning new techniques for loading rocks. He tries new tools. He makes sure he gets home on time so he's rested, comes back in. He just loads a lot of rock, doesn't work as many hours. If we reward Jim instead of Bob, then we're output focused, right? I don't care how many hours you work, I care about the results. Okay, great. But that's not really where we want to end up. Where we really want to end up is here. This is Lisa, okay? Lisa almost got fired because she seemed really lazy. Lisa, you know, she comes to work late. She doesn't load a lot of stuff. That truck is mostly empty, right? But then somebody started looking at, but wait a sec, Lisa, how much value is this worth for the company? It turns out that her truckload is worth 10 times more than anything else. So how can that be? You know, she only works like half time. But she's loading only 4 bricks, but they're worth 10 times more. How? Well, because she spends time following along to see what happens with the bricks. And she learns that, oh, some of these bricks are worth more. They're called gold. And some are called bricks, and they're worth a lot less. That's great. So I'm going to spend some time learning how to sort out the gold from the bricks. And then I'll load just that, right? Great. That organization would be value-oriented. And the trend I see is that a lot of companies, especially big organizations, tend to get stuck in this effort focus. And the symptoms of that is people are obsessing over things like hours, time reports, resource utilization. If you just look at what kind of reports are we writing, what kind of questions are we asking, what kind of stuff are we measuring and talking about, that gives you a hint, right? So effort-oriented. Great if your job is just to produce lots of whatever. But if you want to actually win in a competitive environment, this is a really bad strategy. Now, what happens when you implement any agile method pretty much by the book, it'll take you out of here and into here. You look at things like Scrum and Kanban. Kanban talks a lot about cycle time, or how long does it take for something to get from here to done. Scrum talks a lot about velocity, how many things per sprint, or how many things got done per week. We're measuring things and not measuring hours of or how much sweat we're producing, right? Great, but a lot of companies stop here, and that's an important point. Don't stop here. We want to keep going. Hours and time reports, resource utilization, it's not like that doesn't matter. We can still talk about it, but it should be less important. Same thing here. This is useful to talk about, but it shouldn't be our focus. The most successful companies I've seen are the ones that you go to any team and you ask them what they're working on and why, and they'll explain it in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of profit, in terms of learning. That's what they care about. That's what they measure, right? That's what they visualize. Does that make sense? Right? So that's a really useful mindset thing. And the trend I'm seeing is companies moving down this kind of path of evolution. And it takes time sometimes, especially for bigger organizations. Okay, so let me talk about this weird thing that happened. I mentioned this cycle, right, of publishing material and getting consulting gigs and then learning from them, right? Learning from their successes and failures. At one point, I got involved in a Swedish startup, a music streaming company called Spotify, and then that company grew and really made Agile part of their DNA. Really fascinating. So for many years, been following along in this journey, and I started, trying to put words to their model, because I thought they had an interesting approach, which was a little different because they were kind of born into this, and ended up writing an article and then later on a video, and it was used mainly internally first, and then it was put externally. But what happened was like something I've never seen before. It was absolutely crazy, and it's still going on. It's like the whole world was like, Spotify model. And I'm like, what's the Spotify model? Oh, the thing you wrote, that's the Spotify model. Oh, it wasn't intended to be a model. It was an example, a case study. It was one company. And suddenly the terms we were using internally, things like squads and guilds and tribes, were suddenly used all over the place. There was even a verb, squadification. And now we even have companies offering like certification courses in the Spotify model. I'm like, but this guy's never been at Spotify. Like, really, really interesting. So something clearly happened. And just because I happen to be the guy who wrote about this, because I certainly didn't invent it, but I did kind of write about it, I ended up in this really weird role, which is best illustrated here.
Hail, Messiah! I'm not the Messiah! I say you are Lord, and I should know I followed a few. Hail, Messiah! I'm not the Messiah. Will you please listen? I am not the Messiah. Do you understand?
Only the true
Yes, it felt very strange having to represent this model that I definitely did not invent, but was clearly inspiring a lot of people. And the funny thing was, at the office, people were kind of making fun of me. They're like, Henrik, what's all the fuss about? what's going on? What's this Spotify model thing? And I concluded that, okay, something really interesting is happening, because I visited a lot of these companies, and it was actually quite impressive what a lot were doing. So I don't mean to make fun of them, because I'm actually impressed by what's been going on, but also curious about why is it that one case study happened to create so much impact. And now it's just my speculation, but looking at what's going on, I just think organizations seem kind of desperate for change. And when you want change, you want some example to hold on to. And Spotify happened to be well-timed. It's a company a lot of people know about, and the way of describing it was appealing to people. So then they got inspired. And in the same way that people are inspired about Scrum and Agile, and there's all these frameworks popping up around Agile, and a lot of changes happening. Not always successful, but clearly spreading and increasing. And clearly organizations are desperate for change. And the question is, why? Insert Agile flavor here, by the way. Right there, you can put your own right in there, okay? Okay, big, slow organization. This is some kind of a performance metric. Make up whatever you want here. What happens to big, slow organization when small Agile team comes over here and steals your lunch, right? You've been comfortable for years. Maybe you're a bank, or you're a telco, or you're an energy company, making a lot of money, and you're like, we're cool, we don't have to change. And suddenly this little irritating company over here just steals your market, steals your lunch, changes everything, right? You have to do something. That's what's happening. It seems like industry by industry, one at a time, one of the companies in the industry starts accelerating, building better stuff faster, and then others kind of panic, and for good reason. If we think about what we're working on, what we're delivering to our customers, to what extent is that clear and stable versus kind of unclear and unstable? Right? Think about that for a moment. And then also think about, to what extent is it clear how I'm going to deliver this product or whatever it is? How am I going to satisfy my customer? Is that clear and stable and obvious, or is that unclear, right? So if I'm doing something that I've been doing over and over again, let's say I build web campaigns or I organize events, and the events are kind of the same every time, similar, and I do 20 per year, then I'm probably in this domain that we might call simple, right? I'm using terminology from a model called the Kinevin model, but never mind that. So clear and stable, right, simple. How many of you here, hand up if you'd say hand up if this is your domain. If you live in a domain where it's inherently predictable, you cannot do the same thing over and over again. Anybody? A few? We got a few hands, right? So in that position, you don't really need Agile. Just keep doing whatever you're doing is probably fine, right? Complicated means that, yeah, it's kind of tricky, but it is inherently predictable. We can figure it out, but it takes some planning, right? So how many of you would say you're in that domain? That's another 20 or 30 hands, right? And the complex domain is when, damn, the customer needs are not really clear, and they change. And the solutions are kind of unclear, and the technology changes under our feet. And, stuff just changes, and it makes it kind of tricky. How many of you would say, yeah, that's me? So that's pretty much, yeah, at least half the room. Agile is for you. If you're in that domain, this is what Agile is optimized for. And my hypothesis is that the reason why Agile is spreading is because the world is moving in that way, right? Everything is more interconnected. And because of technology and other things, the cycles are just getting shorter. So the combination of more interconnected, faster moving means more complexity. And more complexity means more need for Agile. So I meet companies that would say, we were doing pretty okay with waterfall before, but it's no longer working because the world is just moving too fast. So now it doesn't work anymore. That's just a trend, right? Okay, so if we look at the different ways of working under these circumstances, waterfall could be described as a predictive process. Think of it like this. There's a goal, here's a cannon, and I have to aim very carefully because I only have one chance, right? So aiming at that goal is like our planning process, right? We create the plan, we create the requirements, etc. And then we shoot the cannon. That's when the project has started. And then it's kind of hard to change. We've aligned everything, planned everything out. The cannonball is flying. And then it turns out that, darn, we didn't think about that. We didn't know about that windy stuff over there. So our ball is off the mark. And then, the goal, it wasn't really where we thought it was. And it moves. And it moves, the longer your project is, the more the goal moves. So we have this really big problem, and then projects fail. So why do we do this so often? And I think it's because this is based on some assumptions, right? Our underlying assumptions are customers know what they need. Because if that's the case, everything gets easier if we can assume that, right? Just ask the customers what they need, write it down, done. Teams know how to deliver it, just make an architecture, implement it, done, and nothing changes along the way, right? If that was true, this would probably work. In a simple domain, right, these three things might be true, and then you're fine. But in a complex domain, forget it. Predictive simply doesn't work. So you need an adaptive process, and so you need another metaphor, not a cannonball that we aim really carefully. Instead, it's a homing missile. We assume the opposite of what I said before. We assume that the customer discovers what they need. And the teams discover how to deliver it, and lots of stuff changes. We just turn the assumptions upside down. And if that's true, don't bother aiming too much. Just get this missile flying in roughly the right direction, and then it has, some intelligence over here, so it can figure out where am I right now in relation to the goal. And then it'll turn. So, oh, didn't know about that. We better turn again. And, oh, the goal, it wasn't where we thought it was, or it just moved, so we kind of turn again. And we gradually kind of home in on the goal. It's just another metaphor, right? But this is why Agile is a paradigm shift, because we're not just switching our process. We're not optimizing our existing process. We are changing the underlying assumptions. All right. So where are we? Now, I'm always wary of looking at statistics, because you can always find some statistics that'll prove anything that you want to prove. But if you just look at the sheer overwhelming amount of evidence around, just randomly Google statistics on Agile adoption, and what you basically see is numbers like this. This is probably exaggerated, but this is one of the bigger studies from version 1. And basically, Agile has gone mainstream, at least within software. So we'll get back to that, right? Agile is not this new weird thing anymore. It's pretty mainstream. It doesn't mean everybody's doing it. It doesn't mean everybody's doing it well, but it's not controversial anymore in most circles. And why are people adopting Agile? Well, the main 3 reasons, according to this study, is speed. They get faster. And manage changing priorities. In other words, manage complexities, right? And productivity. We just get more stuff done. That seems to be kind of the ROI of Agile and the reason for it spreading. So it's not spreading because someone is trying to push it out. It's spreading because of pull, right? Companies want to be able to compete, and then they need to do these things. OK. So some things to ponder during the last 7 minutes here, right? This is a guy pondering. Is Agile only for software? Question 1. Is it a silver bullet? Right? Is it as a miracle cure? Is Agile new? And what's going to happen? Right? Think we can do all that in 7 minutes and 23 seconds? We'll try. OK, is Agile only for software? No, it's not. This is Lego. If you ask them what happened within Lego, it started kind of in the IT parts, and what they say, it's spreading like a virus between departments. And I've seen the same pattern in pretty much every company I've worked with. It tends to start with an IT, and it tends to spread. Not always successfully, but people tend to get inspired, and then it spreads. This is a recruitment team at Spotify using Agile principles to do recruitment. They got inspired by what they saw, so they have a recruitment board where we see candidates flowing through a funnel like this. And every morning, they have a daily stand-up where they look at the status, who's doing what, do we have any problems. Every Monday, they have like a sprint planning meeting kind of thing where they look at priorities. And every Friday, they do a review and look at what have we solved this week, and how did we do, and what do our stakeholders say, right? It's nothing very dramatic, but it's definitely an Agile approach, and it was inspired by in this case, Scrum. This is a company I visited last summer, Saab, which builds a fighter plane, Gripen, which turns out it's the world's most cost-effective military aircraft. Compared to a project going on in the US right now at the same time, it's 50 times lower development cost. It's like bizarre. And it's 10 times lower unit cost. A comparable plane that just has amazingly much better cost effectiveness. There's been a report written on it. I spent a day visiting them to find out what are you doing, and it turned out that we're all co-located, all using Agile practices at every level, every discipline, software, hardware, fuselage design, procurement, everywhere, Scrum teams. And pilots on the same site as the development teams. So teams can literally ask a pilot to try their latest build. Probably in a simulator first. Probably, right. This is a pattern. This is not the norm yet, This is early adopter stuff, but it's still fascinating to see this applied at that scale. But I'm going to give a more funny example. This is from many years ago. I was having a barbecue at my house, and I noticed that there was too many people. I didn't plan for this, right? More people than I thought. So my plan went out the window. So I started, procrastinating, right? Which is what we all do. So instead of preparing for the party, I started drawing, because I like to draw. And I started drawing what needs to happen, kind of in what order. So that was me drawing and having fun. And then I just tried this funny experiment. When people showed up, I told the guests, just pair up with somebody you don't know too well and just grab some item, preferably one of the higher up items, and just let me know if you need any help, right? And they did that, and they thought it was quite fun, actually. People come, they want to help out, and we had a lot of fun, and everything worked out a lot better than I thought. So that was nice. But the big surprise was this. Kids, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, small kids. They looked at this, and they managed to decode the system. They looked at it, and they're like, the stuff that goes on the board happens, right? Stuff that goes up on the board happens. The grown-ups do it. Right, so what would you do if you were a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, and you figured out the system? Ice cream, yeah, ice cream. So they did. They grabbed notes, and they started putting ice creams up, and we had to give them ice cream. Someone wanted some music, right, so put that up. So they managed to hack the system. That's when I learned that these techniques are so obvious that even if a 3 or 4-year-old can get it without any instructions, then maybe project managers and people can get it as well, right? Anybody can understand it. It's really simple. Now, of course, Agile is not all about notes on the wall, but these are principles, right? Visualization, autonomy. Instead of running around controlling, you show what needs to happen and you invite people to help. Just a principle. Way outside of software. So my very, rough take on this is that Agile is kind of up here somewhere. It's getting in the late majority. It's not new and weird anymore in IT and development. But outside of IT, it seems like it's more like here, early adoption going on, right? So really interesting to see this kind of climb up. Okay, next question. Oh, by the way, my new focus is climate change. I'm very interested in climate change. I'm trying to use these principles in that domain too. And it's really interesting to see how the principles are applicable in all kinds of different domains. I'd love to tell you more about that, but if you're curious, just Google that, watch the video, maybe figure out how you can help, right? Shameless pitch of the day. Anyway, is Agile a silver bullet? No. Let me use a metaphor that I stole from a guy named Niklas Modig. Imagine this soccer game going on, right? Everybody's inside their tent, just trying to kick the ball out of their tent. Those are departments, okay? Everybody's just trying to kick the ball out of their tent. Right. What happens the day a team figures out that you can skip the tent and you can run around together and work together to optimize for a high score? Everybody can see the whole situation, nobody's stuck inside tents, and they're working as a team, right? That team is going to win every match. So in that sense, yeah, it's a silver bullet. Only until the day that everybody else has figured this out, right? And when everybody else has figured out that this, tents on the field, bad idea, then Agile is no longer a silver bullet. It's just basic rules of the game, right? So I think that's what's happening with Agile. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the final solution. It's just a jump from here to here, which works better in a complex environment, right? In a non-complex environment, sure, the tents might be fine. Okay. Is it new? No. These are old ideas. You look at the Agile Manifesto, right? I'm not going to go through it in detail. I put the French version here for your sake. But the ideas of individuals and interactions about working, I changed that. It says software, but let's just say solutions or products instead, because then the Agile Manifesto applies to anything. So the idea of focusing on these things, working solutions, customer collaboration, responding to change, instead of focusing on those things, this matters too, but this matters more. That's not a new idea. It's just that the people who invented these Agile methods recognized something that already existed and was already working. And they gave it a name and gave it a label and packaged it. So Agile is not new. It's just old, ancient wisdom being kind of rediscovered and emphasized. Right? Okay, and what the heck is this? How many of you have seen this before? Right, yeah, most of you, right? So the idea here is that this is not a pipe. No, it's a painting of a pipe. Wow, what a great joke, right? It's a painting of a pipe. So what does that have to do with Agile? Well, Agile is just a word, right? Agile is not the thing. Distinguish the word Agile from the things we do. I've seen a lot of companies that are really agile, even though they don't use any of the strange words. And vice versa, I've seen companies that use words like Scrum and XP and Agile and Lean all the time, and they're completely non-agile. So we need to distinguish these things. So how do we recognize the real thing from the word? Well, you go to a company, you notice that, well, they work in teams. They release often. They get user feedback. They focus on value rather than output and cost. They focus more on value. They experiment a lot. Right? They try things out. Those are symptoms of kind of real agility, whether or not you use the funny words. Okay, so let's wrap this up, right? Next 10 years, this is the part I'm very uncomfortable with because God knows what happens in 10 years, right? But okay, I'll just make a crazy guess. My guess is more complexity, faster change. That's just going to keep going. And because of that, Agile will keep spreading, because it has to. Otherwise, you can't compete in a complex environment. That's my guess. The word Agile will probably disappear because it's kind of getting overused, and then it gets watered down. So the word Agile might get forgotten, but the principles get more and more embedded in the way we work. So basically, I think this approach will be considered obvious and therefore not interesting to talk about. Right? That's just my guess. I see it almost happening now. The different frameworks, Scrum, Kanban, Lean Startup, and DevOps, and continuous delivery, all these words, they'll come and go because, it's a fashion industry, and sometimes we need a new word for something because just to make it cool again, right? So buzzwords keep coming, going. In complex competitive industries, organizations that don't manage to go agile will die off. It's already happening. It's going to keep happening, probably. It takes time, right? Big companies sometimes take a long time to die. But what I notice now is inside big companies, there is like a kind of panic, especially within banking industry. Like, we have to go agile or we will die. I've heard CEOs literally say that to pretty much the whole company. Really interesting. So yeah, disruption going on. It's going to keep happening. So takeaways, what I hope you walk away here with. Takeaways, right? Agile is a tool. It's not a goal. It's a toolkit, right? Like any tool, it can be misused. Like any tool, you got to learn how to use it and when it fits. Distinguish between the word and the principles, right? Words come and go, but principles are timeless. Distinguish between the principles and the practices. Out here, we have all these things we're doing, right? Daily Scrum, etc. This is what matters. So learn that stuff, but you also need to learn that, or else you won't do this effectively, especially across industries, right? When you move an Agile principle to an industry very far away from software, the practices will look different, but the principles will be probably the same, right? Agile is optimized for complexity. Keep that in mind. So you don't need Agile if you're here, but the more you are here, the more you're going to need Agile principles. And finally, Agile is not a place you get to. It's not like, hey, we're done. You can check off the box, right? It's just a direction. It's not a place. So you're not going to get it right from the start. Don't worry if you try to move in this direction and you stumble. Just keep stumbling, and after a while, you'll be getting the grip on things. So yeah, that's all I had to say. So thank you very much. Yeah.